Okay. By way of full disclosure, I sometimes can talk slow. I can sometimes get emotional. I have a bit of a tremor, and sometimes I have a little trouble with internet speed here at the BALI satellite studio. But with luck, none of this will get in the way of this evening's entertainment. I was born in New York City. I am an identical twin, have a younger sister. I was a chubby, non-athletic kid, second generation of Polish, Russian, Jewish immigrants, studied chemical engineering at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, worked for a couple of years as a chemical engineer in northern New Jersey on a major development project. And while I was living there, I did a little running at a local Y as part of a warm-up for a judo class I was taking. I got interested in patent law, at least I thought maybe I had an interest. And in order to see whether law would be right for me, I decided I would take the LSAT exam, Law Student Aptitude Test, which I signed up for in Newark, New Jersey. And I showed up at the Park Avenue location where the test was being given, and I discovered that there were two Park Avenues or Park Streets in Newark, and I was at the wrong one. I had found a parking spot. I had 15 minutes before the exam was to be given, and I didn't know if I could find a parking spot next to the correct address. I had some directions I was given as to where the place was. And so I just took off running in the direction to the correct place, I hoped. I found it. I entered sweating and breathing hard. I did take the exam after sitting there and catching my breath for quite a while. I got a good mark on the exam. I ended up going to law school at George Washington Law School in Washington, D.C., and I did become a patent attorney. So that little bit of running turned out to change my life. In law school, I went at night most of the time, working in the U.S. Patent Office. In 1969, I came out here to Seattle to work as a patent attorney, then as an environmental lawyer, and then as Red Robin's first vice president, secretary, and general counsel, where I joked that I did hamburger and bun law. In 1988, I opened my own law practice, which I am now winding down. I have 3 children, 3 grandchildren, 4 more honorary grandchildren through my partner, Pauline. And I am now, with luck, going to show you a picture to kick off this program. Come on, picture.
Sure.
Video. Can you see it all right?
There we go. So we will stop sharing and get back to the story here. What we're going to do tonight, we'll have a little bit of fun. We'll talk about some data and history of marathons. What is it? Who can do it? What some of the equipment that would be necessary for being involved, something about training, about eating, tips and philosophy, some war stories related to it. So let's jump in. What is a marathon? Well, as many of you may know, it's a 26.2 mile timed run. Now, why would anybody be interested in that? Well, according to a latest report that I read about from an article February 10 of this year, which reports on an article in Sports and Fitness Industry Association. There are at least 49 million active runners in America, which represents roughly 15% of the entire population. In terms of hardcore runners, a total of about 450,000 Americans finished marathons in the US in 2019. And those figures don't account for the vast number of people who love running more than, well, it doesn't count for people who just go out and run 5Ks, which is about 3 miles, or 10Ks, or a variety of other runs. Now, by running, you're putting yourself at lower risk of heart disease, cancer, even neurological diseases such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Additional benefits include better sleep and better weight loss. According to a study published in the journal Mayo Clinic Proceedings, running 6 miles a week, or roughly 52 minutes total, could potentially add upwards of 6 years to your life. The goal for most runners that I know, most of us mortal runners, not the Olympic runners, is to run a marathon in 4 hours or less. Now, my best marathon came in November of 1990 in a Seattle marathon, when I ran that in 3 hours, 52 minutes, and 32 seconds. And with some luck, I'm going to be able to show you a picture of that. This is a picture of the race number that I was wearing in that race. And as you all probably are familiar, in all of these races, everybody gets a number. They put it on themselves with safety pins. And after each race, I would save those numbers. I've got a whole collection of them. And I would write my official time down here, and then my actual time. I guess that was because there was a certain delay before I actually got to the start line. Let me now stop sharing.
Same.
Share screen. Share.
Stu, we weren't seeing that picture, so I don't think you were sharing at that moment.
I was not sharing. Share screen. Oops. Sorry about that. How about now?
Yes.
All right. No wonder I didn't see the stop share because I didn't have the share on. Sorry about that. Anyway, this is the race bib that I was wearing at the time. Okay, so let's stop that share and move along. Why I got into long distance running. My best friend and I were out of work at the same time. He liked to run, and frankly, I liked to be with him. And so we would go out and run and commiserate about not having jobs and talk about all kinds of things. Also, running releases endorphins. These are hormones or other body chemicals that give you a feeling of good feeling, a feeling of being healthy and fine. And also, if you run a marathon or a long distance, you get a real ego boost. Now, I have run 27 of these marathons. Among them, the one that I found that had the best scenery, surprisingly enough, was the Seattle Rock and Roll Marathon. And that started actually down below Tukwila, and we ran up along what is now the light rail line. We ended up on the viaduct, which is no longer there, but we had a spectacular view of the city. I was amazed because I'd lived in this city for so long, but I was surprised at how beautiful the scenery was from there. One of the most disappointing marathons I ran was in Arizona. I thought that I was going to be seeing cactuses and cliffs and all sorts of desert beauty. And it turned out that we were running through neighborhoods and just seeing people's homes. One of the most interesting marathons was the New York City Marathon, which I ran in 1990. And if I do this right, I'm going to be able to show you a picture of Can you see that? No, yes,
No.
no. Share screen. Still no shared screen. I
Can't
have
see
to,
it.
I have to have my technical team come back down here. Sorry about that.
You can tell him,
There it is.
Michael, come on.
He's got it.
Okay. How about that?
Yep.
We see it.
Okay. Sorry about that. All right. The New York City Marathon begins on Staten Island, and in the race that I ran, there were a bit over 25,000 runners. They all get collected right here in a park on the Staten Island side of the bridge,
Okay, so
and they collect for about 3 hours, 2 or 3 hours. They get released in waves called corrals, and then they go surging over this bridge into Brooklyn, I guess it is. Now, one of the most amazing things about this was all of us who came from New York, just about all, we caught a bus about 4:30 in the morning near the New York Public Library in Manhattan. And that bus came over this bridge and brought us into this area where we had to wait around for a couple of hours until this race was going to start. What happens is you get a lot of people who are waiting to start a marathon, and one of the things they're all doing is hydrating, meaning they're drinking a lot of water. That means that they're going to have to pee a lot. And so the organizers had set up like a rain gutter that ran right along the edge here of the park. And when I came down this off ramp in the bus, I happened to be sitting on this side, and there were maybe 120 guys facing me who were aiming at this rain gutter, peeing into it. Amazing.
what do the women do?
And then
Porta potties.
let's see here. While we're at it, I'm going to show you. This is the number that I was wearing when I ran in that New York City Marathon. And actually, it surprised me. I see that I ran on 4 hours and 8 minutes and some seconds. I thought I had done it slower. In this race, you run through all 5 boroughs of New York City. It was the most onlookers of any race that I'd ever run. And people were out there cheering and offering us things to eat as we ran. I remember there was one woman who was offering us plates of chewing gum. I don't know why she thought that that would be a good thing to have while you're running a marathon, but she was being really generous about it. In Honolulu, I remember that marathon because at the beginning, it rained so hard, it actually rained sideways. And we had to stand around for a half an hour or 45 minutes waiting for this thing to start. So as you can imagine, everybody got pretty wet. I am still running. I jog about 5 days a week. I average about 14 miles or so a week, and it can vary from 2 to 6 miles a day. So let's stop sharing and go back here. Talk a little bit about the history of marathons. There is a legend built on the Battle of Marathon between the Greeks and the Persians, which took place reportedly in 490 BC. The legend emerged about 500 years later, according to what I read, that a runner named Philippides ran back to Athens, maybe 24 or 26 miles, to report the Greek victory. In some versions of this story, he dropped dead after making that report. Anyway, it's pretty hard to confirm that, but that's the legend. The first Olympic marathon was actually in 1896. The largest marathon was in 2018 in New York City, where there were just 5 runners short of 52,000 people who started. And amazingly, there were 99% of those 52,000 people finished the race. So you can see that it's quite doable. The world record for a marathon is held by a guy named Eliud Kipchoge. He's a Kenyan. And in 2018 in Berlin, he ran the marathon in 2 hours, 1 minute and 39 seconds, which meant that he was running 4.64 minute miles. Now, you probably know that the best miler in the world will run something under 4 minute mile. So Eliud was running a little over 4 minute miles, only he was doing 26 of them. That meant he was running at about 12, 13 miles an hour. To give you a comparison, a cheetah, which I think is supposed to be the fastest mammal in the world, runs about 68 miles an hour. Well, it's very impressive, but a cheetah can only do that for 60 seconds. It turns out that a man could probably outrun a cheetah given enough time. There's a wonderful book called Born to Run, which goes into a detailed explanation of that. And that's because men run upright, which allows us to take multiple breaths with each stride. An animal, a 4-legged animal, can only take 1 breath with each stride. And so they tire much more easily and more quickly than we do. Another comparison, though, Usain Bolt, fastest man in the world, ran 100 meters in 9.58 seconds. So he was doing about 29.5 miles an hour. Okay, so who can run a marathon? Well, I want you to think about it this way. Running a marathon, getting ready to run a marathon, it's a journey. The race is just the destination. It's like learning how to play a violin. You can learn and you can achieve a great deal in a little while. The more you stick to it, the more you're going to learn about it. But what I want to get across is that the journey is a lot of the fun of running a marathon, getting to the start of the race, not just the race. Okay, so who can do it? Anybody that's willing, who's able to put in the time. You really don't need much equipment. You can train almost anytime, almost anywhere. And it's a quick way to learn new areas, even parts of your own city. When I go to a new place on a trip, I like to go out jogging in the morning and get a feel for where I am, where I want to go back to during the day. How about injuries? People say, oh, well, I'm too old for this, or my knees hurt, whatever. The way people get injured, assuming that they haven't gotten some physical injury through some other accident, is by overtraining. You have to learn how to train in an even, intelligent fashion. In all my years of running, I know of one young woman who was seriously injured running. She was hit by a bicycler who came up behind her. We were out on the Sammamish River Trail, and the cyclist, I guess, wasn't looking. Of course, Kathy couldn't see behind her, and she got knocked over. All right, let's talk about training. And we need to go back to screen sharing. And you are going to see I hope, share. Okay. This is going to tell you almost everything you know about need to know about how to train for a marathon. First of all, this is the schedule. That means you're going to be committing time to the process. You'll see this schedule starts at the end of January, and the race itself is in the early part of June. Now, you could have a different schedule, but this is an intelligent, reasonable way to approach training. You'll also see that it has 2 days a week where you don't run at all, rest days. And it turns out, according to the coaches that I've worked with, that you actually build up your muscles on the days that you rest. So it's important that you actually do that. You'll also see that as the time progresses through the weeks, the runs get longer. Now they get longer in time. You don't run for distance, you run for time. So if you're running 30 minutes for a period of days, then after a while you're going to be running 40 minutes, and then you might up it to 50 minutes. You do your long runs on the weekends, on Saturday. Here, actually, this one has Sundays as kind of easy runs. Another thing you'll notice is this is a training program for a marathon. The longest run here, if you're figuring that the runner is doing 9-minute miles, which means they're going to finish in under 4 hours. In 180 minutes, they're going to run 20 miles. So you never run 26 miles in training. You'll run 20 miles, 18 miles, maybe 22 miles, and that will be the maximum amount you need to train up to, because it turns out that if you can run that, then you're going to be able to finish the marathon, and there's no point in beating up your body to run more than that. All right. Let's see. We are now, let's see, what is useful? Running with buddies or a group makes this much more fun. I'm going to show you a picture. This is my longtime running buddy, Louis Richmond. He and I have been running together probably for 40 years. I bet we've run 15 marathons together, literally thousands of miles. We ran 5 miles last Sunday, 2 days ago. We go out and we talk about anything. And we've run this city sideways and upside down and crosswise. And it makes running so much more fun. This is another wonderful way to get into running. This is a group called Team in Training. They support the Leukemia Lymphoma Society Foundation. And this group routinely takes people who have never run a marathon. And within 4 months, they will train them so that they will be able to finish a marathon. In fact, that training schedule I showed you comes from Team in Training. And I ran with Team in Training for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. They will teach you about the clothing to wear, about the food to eat, about the shoes to wear. They will teach you about training. They will schedule you. You will meet with them on weekends. Even during the week, you can meet them some evenings and go out running. And then you all get together and travel to some place. They have some exotic locations. You might go to Madrid. You might go to Vancouver. You probably will all stay in the same hotel. You'll all run the same race. You'll have a gigantic party at the end of it where everybody is just higher than a kite because they just ran 26.2 miles and they want to talk about it and talk about this or that they saw and that bridge they had to run over, and wow, wasn't this part tough and that part amazing. And it's a super way to learn how to run. The downside is, of course, they want you to help raise money for the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. And in exchange for targeted amounts of money that you raise, they provide all the other things. I've lost track of how they're handling their money fundraising efforts during COVID. And I know that they were cutting back on the goodies some years ago, which really disappointed me. But when I was involved with them, it was pretty spectacular. Equipment. Never try anything new when you're going to run a race. You got those wonderful new shoes, you got a new shirt, whatever it is, you don't want to find out how it feels to run in that thing, that new hat, that new socks. You don't want to find that out at mile 18 in a race. You save that for when you're at home practicing. Here, I'm going to show you what a well-dressed marathoner looks like. And yes, I am wearing a large garbage bag. This is something that I learned after a few years of marathoning. This is a perfect way of staying warm while you're standing around outside in cold weather. It might be raining. I've worn them in the snow. And when you're waiting for the race to start, when you're getting ready, warming up to a comfortable speed, you can trot along in that great looking outfit. And then when you're warm enough, you take it off and you toss it into a trash can as you're running by, and you never give it another thought. So it's something I highly recommend. I'm going to show you some interesting equipment. These are related to shoes. You've all got running shoes of some kind or other, but just quickly, this is a pair of shoes, the company called Scora. I had a couple of those. These are like loafers, no shoelaces to tie. These are almost like the barefoot shoes, very little padding. They're very comfortable to wear though, and very easy to get off and on. And I'm sorry that the company no longer makes them. Here's a remarkable shoe. Actually, this is a sandal. This is a running sandal. one of the greatest inventions in running. You can run a marathon in this thing comfortably, and you can take it along on a vacation. You don't need to pack a pair of sandals and a pair of running shoes. This thing is convertible, very, very comfortable. Unfortunately, they don't make them anymore either. Okay, so we'll talk about shirts just a bit. I'll stop sharing. When I was getting ready to run my first marathon after I did my training, I went up to Super Jock and Jill. Now, Super Jock and Jill, as you may know, is a private running store up on the north side of Green Lake. And I went in there and I told the clerk, the salesman, that I was going to run my first marathon, and I wanted him to sell me anything. I mean, I wanted the Superman pants. I wanted the sleek wind, the ones that would cut through the air. I wanted the shoes that would spring me extra high. Whatever it was, I wanted it. I was willing to pay for it. And he looked at me and he said, oh, your first marathon, huh? You need 2 shirts. And he sold me 2 microfiber shirts. And he said, you want a tip on how to run a marathon? So I said, oh, yeah, tell me what. He said, well, if you have to pee, he said, find a place to do it, because if you don't, you're going to be thinking about that for 15 miles and you're going to be miserable. And that was his tip for me, and it was really good advice. Okay, now let's talk about running watches. Let's go back to screen share. And okay, can everybody see a watch?
Mhm.
Okay, good. All right, this is a Garmin running watch, which I got, I don't know, about 3 or 4 months ago. This thing cost about $150. It is an absolutely amazing device. With this watch, you can track where you've been running. This is a run that I took a couple of weeks ago, and it will show you by the street. You can enlarge this. It will give you how many miles you ran, what your time was, what your average pace is, the elevation change, how many calories you burn theoretically. There's other data here, your elevation during various parts of the run. The pace is mapped out for you during various parts of the run, your heart rate, and more. You push a button and up comes this little symbol that tells you you're in the running mode. This thing has about 5 different modes that you can choose. In fact, you can set this watch to a program which will train you to run a marathon. I haven't tried it yet, but I'm sure it will have a program with a schedule like I showed you earlier in this presentation. Anyway, you hit the run button and it tells you it's waiting to pick up a GPS signal. Then when it's ready, it shows you these digits. Then you hit the start button, you get a readout with your pace and then the time you've been running and then the distance. Okay, let's jump to eating. You can eat while you are running. I usually do. I bring along a power bar, and it used to be, well, power bar has evolved over the years. This is the kind that's currently available that I like. There are fluids that you can eat, drink during a race. One of them is produced by a company called Noon. These are little tablets about the size of a quarter. You can break them in half, drop them into a little 8-ounce container of water, and it is sort of like your instant Gatorade, only more specific for runners and athletes of that nature. And they're really very handy. Now, when you get done running, well, let's see, I'm jumping ahead of myself. Let's talk about some other clothing. Socks, tube socks are really the best thing. These are one sock inside another, and that keeps your foot from getting chafed or blistered. Hats with visors are very handy because the brim will keep the sun out of your eyes, or if you're running at night, you will be able to keep headlights out of your eyes. As far as running with a headset, some marathons used to prohibit them because you were running through streets and they didn't want the runners to not be able to hear traffic. I'm not sure if that's still the case because headsets are so prevalent now that they may be unable to keep people from using them. One of the things I didn't mention is that in all marathons now, I would say all of the runners carry a chip. This is a microchip of one form or another. Nowadays, it's just a strip of adhesive paper with some electronic component. It usually is pasted to the bib you're wearing, and it automatically recognizes when you step over the starting line, and it recognizes when you go over. Usually there's a reader at the halfway point and a reader at the finish line. So you are electronically tracked and measured. So your time can be quite accurate. What to eat. Before running, I like to eat a banana and a little bit of coffee. While you're training, carbohydrates are good, particularly as you get closer to the race. What's a lot of fun is like the week before the race, I would stuff myself with pastries, cookies, whatever. And if anybody asked, I would just tell them I was training. And while running, as I mentioned, an energy bar, there are things called goo. It comes in a little foil pouch. It's like a jelly. You tear off one end of it and squeeze that jelly into your mouth, and it's got a high energy component. They're often given out during the race by the manufacturers to get you used to it. Okay, let's talk about the race. Stop sharing. And thank you for bearing with me here. Getting to the start. Most of the time you have to get up very early in the morning. These races are run most of the time on city streets. And so the organizers in the cities don't want these monster crowds clogging up their streets. And it's usually a weekend when they're run, and they want the crowds off the streets as soon as possible. So that means the race has to be run early in the morning. That means you've got to get up at some god-awful time, get yourself assembled, make sure you've got all the parts you need, all the race numbers and chips, and whether you need your gloves and your hat and your power bar and your dry clothes that you're going to bring along to wear after you get done with the race, and your water and your sports drink, whatever. Then in the race, at the beginning, you're going to stand around waiting for it to start. And I mentioned the corrals where they release people in waves. They'll be listening to pep talks, sometimes politicians, sometimes the mayor. There'll be speeches, there'll be music. Finally, the race gets going. There are races that are closed loops, which are the kind that I like. There are open loops, which means it's like a horseshoe where you start in one place and you'll end up someplace else. So that means you have to have a way to get to the start. And then once you get to the end, you have to have a way to get back to where you started, or vice versa. Often there are buses provided for that. And often in a race, there are portions that are out and back. So you could be running for miles on one side of a road, and you're looking at hundreds, maybe thousands of people who are on the other side of the road, and they're running back because they've already got to where you're headed, but they got there and they turned around and they're already running back. And you're thinking about the fact that you haven't got there yet, and you're really wishing you could get there and turn around and run back yourself. After the race, you want to get warm, and you end up in the, let's see, share screen. End up in the finish area, and you usually get a space blanket. This is Mylar, and it'll keep you very warm. I have a collection of these things. I carry some around in the trunk of my car. They make great picnic blankets for emergencies, tablecloths, whatever. And you also get your finisher's medals. Now, over the years, I've accumulated quite a collection, and I have even more, but these are the ones that I could lay my hands on. Okay, let's talk about a few other things, tips and philosophies. I recommend that if you're going to run a marathon, that you start slow. I used to like to start toward the end of the pack. You find that the real pros and the rabbits, they will start at the front. And the new guys and the excited ones, they start at the front. Well, you got 26 miles to go. And those people have a tendency to burn out sooner than later. And I would find that I would pass a lot of them later on. Keeping an even pace is something that you aim for, and it can even become a philosophy. I remember using it once in a lawsuit. I was involved in litigating a case. I'm not a litigator. I was up against a real pro, a woman who was a thoroughbred litigator representing a big organization, and I was representing a little guy. And I knew that she could run rings around me. But I thought that if I could keep up an even pace and just keep preparing, getting ready, anyway, that I thought I could outrun her. And I did. When we showed up for the final hearing, I had a notebook that was about 2 inches thick, full of all my evidence and reasons why my client should prevail. And the first thing she did was to admit that her client was liable in this case. She wasn't even going to argue about who was liable. The only thing she wanted to argue about was how much her client was going to pay my client. Anyway, some of this philosophy about, it's like the zen of running a marathon. You should run only so fast as you can talk. You talk to runners along the way. I would do that all the time. I'd strike up conversations with people, and it would make the time pass, and I would learn a lot and enjoy it. Stop at all the water stops. About every 3 miles, there will be a water station with maybe 20 or 30 people handing out cups of water or invariably cups of some kinds of sports drink. And if you stop and actually drink there, you will find that you'll be refreshed and your time won't be diminished. If you keep on running or you try to drink while you're running, you'll have a big chance of coughing, of pouring the stuff on your shirt, and you're just far better off to just stop, take a few breaths, drink the liquid, and then power on. One of the things that I like to do would be to thank the volunteers. There are hundreds of volunteers out at each street corner with cleaning up. There are thousands of water cups. People will drink the water and then they'll crumple their cup and just throw it down in the street as they run on. There are police out there directing traffic. Thank the volunteers. They appreciate it. High five the kids as you go by. They're standing on the sides and they love it, and it's just a lot of fun. Don't believe the spectators in the last few miles. You're at about mile 22, puffing along, and there's somebody on the side and they say, it's just around the corner. The finish is just around the corner, or it's just whatever. And for a split second, you want to believe them, and it's not true. Anyway, after a while, you learn not to believe those people. As I mentioned earlier, it's orders of magnitude easier if you train with other people, if you have a running buddy. One of the things that I recommend is that you prepare yourself to avoid some chafing. If you're going to run 26 miles, some part of your clothing is going to rub up and down against you. I have finished a number of races and I'll see guys standing in the finish area and I can tell that there's actually blood running down from their nipples. That's because their shirts got sweaty and they were rubbing up and down. It almost gets to be like sandpaper. So you can put Band-Aids on them. You can carry a little tube of something called Aquaphor. Let's do a little screen slide, a share here. And there is something called Body Glide. This is great stuff. It looks like a tube of underarm deodorant, but it's just protection. You can rub it on your thighs, on your nipples, wherever you're likely to chafe. This stuff is going to make your life a lot happier. One other thing, remember that when you get to mile 18, that's your ticket into this race. The race really starts at mile 18. At that point, your marathon really begins. if you got to mile 18, you've got another 8 miles to go, but you're probably going to make it. A last tip is cold baths. After you've finished running, one of the best ways to mitigate the pain and suffering from having run such a distance is a cold bath or cold water. When I was with Team in Training, and we would do like an 18-mile run out of Matthews Beach, why we would wade into Lake Washington up to our waist in the winter time and stay there for 15 or 20 minutes. When I would get home at other times, I'd fill the bathtub with cold water. I'd put on a fleece vest, get a hot cup of coffee, turn the radio on, sit down in that cold bath for 15 or 20 minutes. And it is remarkable how that helps you and your legs recover. Okay, I'm going to tell you a few stories, and we'll close with a few pictures, and then we will open it up for questions. And I appreciate your patience. Okay, in one race I ran, there was an older guy who was plodding along. He probably was younger than I am now. He was wearing a t-shirt, plain white t-shirt that he had written on with magic marker on his back. And it said, "I may be slow, but I'm ahead of you." And he was right. He was. But I was pleased that I managed to get ahead of him. I've seen people run marathons barefoot. I've seen blind runners. These are people who run with a guide. They may run on a tether, or they run like with a broomstick with the guide running ahead. I've seen a one-legged runner with a one of those running blades on the other leg. I've seen very few parent-child runners. In fact, it's rare, very, very rare to see a runner maybe under the age of 16 or so. Massage. A lot of times there are free massages at the end of the race because there are people who are studying massage and they want a chance to practice. There are a lot of runners who would like nothing better than to get a massage. And so you can sign up. I did that after a Victorian marathon, and it turned out to be a mistake. I got a student who was a big husky Victoria policeman who was looking to change careers, and he decided to really dig into my calves. And I decided that, oh boy, this hurts. It must be good. Anyway, it wasn't good. It took a fair amount of physical therapy to get over that. In San Diego, I wanted to run a half marathon, and I got to the point where the half marathoners were to separate from the full marathoners. Now, there was a race official who was standing in the raceway, and he was saying half marathoners right, full marathoners left. Okay, it happened that he was using his right hand and his left hand, which happened to be different from the runner's right hand and left hand because he was facing us. So I went off on the wrong track, and I was running, and I got to about 11 miles, and I was thinking, boy, this race is just about over. I'm only running the half marathon. There's only 2 more miles to run. And I was talking to some people, and I said, wow, we're almost done. And they said, what do you mean we're almost done? And it soon became clear to me that I had gone off on the full marathon route. I then stopped to talk to another official race monitor. I got a map of the route. I left the course. I ran through downtown San Diego. I broke the ranks, and I finally caught up with the half marathoners and finished the race with them. The same sort of thing happened to me in a Vancouver marathon in Stanley Park, where there was a fork in the race course. There was nobody there who appeared to be directing the race. And a bunch of the people in front of me went off to the right, so I did too. It soon appeared after a mile or so that we were about to go over the Lionsgate Bridge, which I knew was not going to be correct. And so we turned around and came back. And at that fork, we went off in what was then the correct direction, fuming and steaming. It happened that I knew later on in the race that there was what's called a dog leg, where the race organizers add an out and back just to make sure the race comes out the right length. I decided I would skip that part. I had already done my extra miles, so I let that go. I am going to share now a screen, just show you some pictures of different races and so on. And we're just about at the end. This is in the San Francisco Marathon finish. This is not a very good picture, but the crowd in a Vancouver marathon that I was in. At one point, when I was trying to raise money for the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, I sent out a holiday greeting card, which I did every year for my law office. And I used that greeting card as a way to say happy holidays to my clients, and also to ask them for money to support the run that I was going to be doing, the Nike Half Marathon, which was in Washington, D.C. This is a picture from the Victoria Marathon in 2005. And this is a Whidbey Island Half Marathon. Okay. So You must be looking at a picture of Harriet Thompson. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I was going to show you this at the end. This is a most remarkable picture. This woman, Harriet Thompson, is shown finishing the 2016 San Diego Marathon. What's particularly amazing about this picture is that she's 92 years old. She also was a concert pianist. Go Harriet. 2 years later, she ran the San Diego half marathon. One last picture. There's a hood to coast race. This is a different kind of race. It's a 199-mile relay. You do that with a team of 12. Sometime ask me about it and I'll be happy to tell you. So thank you for sticking with me. And if any of you are still here and willing and wanting to ask questions, I'm all ears.
Hey, Stuart, this is Pesha.
Yeah, hi, Pesha.
I'm just kind of curious, what do you think about when you're running for so long? I mean, what goes through? Do you just kind of eventually go into a trance state, or are you mulling over ideas, or what do you do?
All kinds of things. Sometimes I'm thinking about who I can strike up a conversation with, because that makes the time go by. Sometimes I'm thinking about when the next water station is going to be, or where I'm going to get the next free goodie, the next power bar that somebody's handing out. Sometimes I'm thinking about how nice it's going to be when I'm done. But I will say that it takes about, it would take me about 45 minutes to get into a comfortable pace. And I would know that. So I wouldn't expect to be running comfortably for about 45 minutes. And then I would get comfortable. And after that, it would become much easier to run for quite a long while. So sometimes I'd be waiting to kind of break into that easy flow. And sometimes I'd just be thinking about things you think about all the time. Think about work, think about family. And toward the end, sometimes I'm thinking about, I am never going to do this again. Why in the world am I doing this? Thank you for your question.
Thank you, that's interesting.
So when's your next marathon?
Well, I think I've given up marathons. I probably did a marathon about 4 or 5 years ago. And then I got into doing half marathons. But maybe 4 months ago, I decided to see whether I could run a half marathon. And I just went out, and at the speed that I run now, I actually run about half the speed that I used to run. Could I run faster? Probably, but not comfortably. So I ran for 4 hours, and that would get me easily over the course of a half marathon. I just did it to see if I could do it. I ran along the Burke-Gilman Trail, and I did it. And so I felt really good at the end of that time. So maybe I'll sign up for the half marathon. In my regular running days, I would go out and run a half marathon without much training because I felt that I was fit enough to run a marathon. I really didn't need to do a whole lot of training. And so I ran the Seattle Half Marathon almost every year. Anyway, that's a long answer to your question.
What about the the traditional pasta feed that marathoners engage in before a marathon?
Well, sometimes team in training would have such a pasta feed, and I would participate. It would be good to have some kind of carbohydrate meal beforehand. It's not a good idea to really stuff yourself. You don't want a big meal sloshing around in your stomach while you're out there pounding the pavement. But after you're finished running, you have this feeling that you're entitled to eat anything. Bricks, stone walls, lobsters, steaks, you name it. Yeah. After you run a marathon, there's this ego trip that will last for 2 or 3 days. That you're a pretty amazing person, and then you realize, you're just a person. But that's one of the great benefits.
And what was the reason for the cold bath? Is that to keep the muscles from seizing up?
That's because the blood vessels supposedly swell and some of them rupture. That's what my coaches would say. The team in training provided coaches and medical advice, and the cold just cuts down on that swelling. Now, I've read that there are these cryo baths, CRYO, cryo baths, that some athletes use, baseball teams, where the athlete will actually get into this super cold tank for a brief period of time to really freeze themselves, I don't know, for a few minutes. And it's supposed to be very good for helping with recovery. And I found it so. Now, it's typical, though, after you run a marathon, that the next day you can feel kind of weak. It's hard to stand up out of a chair, going up and down stairs. The worst is usually 2 days after. But it's a good kind of ache. It's like, I know why it hurts, and it's terrific. I'm so glad it hurts like that. I'm okay. But it is a whole lot better if you walk once you finish the race. Don't just stop dead. One thing I didn't mention is hydrate a lot. The best cure is chocolate milk, believe it or not. I used to drink copious quantities of chocolate milk. And And then cold baths. Yeah. Okay, well, I really appreciate you guys hanging with me. In 2 weeks, we will have the pleasure of Ellen Lyons talking to us about her gemology, her jewelry work, and why she uses Fairmine metals and gems in her work and how important that is to her. If any of you have suggestions on other topics you'd like to hear about, why, thank you if you'll let me know. And if any of you would like to join the committee that runs these programs, why, please let me know. This is going to be recorded, as I said, and I'll post a link for those who would like to watch it, or if you have friends who missed it, that is something you can tell them about. So thanks so much, and have a great evening. Good night.
Thank you, Stu. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Thanks,
Stu.
Stu. Great
Thank
stuff.
you.